real test.
This is the real test. It says we are streaming. We are streaming. And on YouTube, we are streaming. Boom.
Let's see.
You don't trust it?
I don't. I never trust. Talk. There it is. We are indeed live.
But I don't hear anything.
There it is. We are indeed live. Welcome, friends, to Talkin' Toast. You have 2 minutes before we officially begin. So go grab a drink, grab a friend, but don't grab your friend's drink.
Unless you're bringing it to him.
I brought you this tonight.
You did bring me this
Craft
tonight.
Crush.
Craft Crush. It tastes a lot like a real crush.
Yeah,
like
it's good. If you're not going to make an orange crush yourself, the official drink of Maryland.
Yeah. Which is very interesting that becomes like the official drink of Maryland. Somebody said, yeah, it's a Maryland thing to me. And I was like, because of all the orange trees?
Yeah.
Just so you know.
I just leaned up in this chair and I just about came into your lap.
That's okay. We don't have any orange trees. That's the reason why that's funny. It was almost, whenever I arrived at the beach the other day, it was almost light jacket weather.
No way.
Yeah. It was it was 72 degrees, but the wind was blowing.
Oh yeah,
really strong. So it was a nice breeze.
I wrapped up in a blanket today when I was down here working because it's cold down in the basement.
Yeah, it feels so good down here.
Yeah,
I love it.
So let us know if you are at Hell's Door tonight.
Hell's Door.
With the heat that you're experiencing, or if you're just in the third stage of
are you talking about Dante's Inferno?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, let us know where you're viewing from tonight.
Based on what kind of fruit can grow in your area.
Yeah.
Can you grow oranges?
Yes.
We'll be able to grow oranges in like 3 years here, probably.
No. I guess apples grow here pretty well.
Apples and pumpkins.
Yeah, pumpkins grow here pretty well.
Blueberries. Not as good as they do down south, but
yeah,
we have blueberry farms up here.
We do. It pains my heart to say this, but I've had some really good Maryland peaches.
Yeah, we can grow some peaches. What can you grow?
Yeah. What? Where? And this can go on throughout the week. If there's anything that you would like to share, yeah.
I did almost buy a lemon tree the other day because I was considering growing lemons in our backyard because it's a moderate-sized tree. This is what happens when you send your spouse to Lowe's. But then I learned that lemon trees cannot survive Maryland winters.
Makes sense.
Or as of, when standards for agriculture were written, they could not. But now they probably could. Who knows?
That's awesome. So, we do have some folks watching. Deanna Choplin, I was talking to you earlier today on Facebook. She said, I am a new graduate as of June 9th. We are so proud of you. Congratulations. That is awesome.
Are you going to get to see Deanna in a couple weeks?
No, I'm not. But we see each other from a distance. I see you.
All right.
And it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So yeah, here we are.
We start every week at 8:28. That's our official start time.
Ish.
But we do have this time together as a way to draw back the curtain on our creative process in beginning our sermon process through dialogue and conversation with you all. So we want you to chime in, and we want you to help shape what we're thinking about for our sermons this week. But really, what we want most of all is a good conversation, because these are conversations that we would have on a regular basis behind closed doors, probably most likely in the car. Literally multiple closed doors there. But
4 of them.
Five if you
of
count
them.
the hatchback. But we wanted to kind of open it up because this creative process is conducive for a lot of voices to contribute to.
That's
it.
exactly right. And you can contribute more than the fruit in your area. But if you want to chime in at some point, or if you're just watching right now and you see someone say, like, get a fig tree like your neighbor, the question was, what fruit grows in your area?
I would love to have a fig tree.
Me too. I think a fig tree would be beautiful.
Get a fig tree.
Let's do it. We've got that spot in the back.
That's like Ross Gay.
Yeah.
You know, to the fig tree on 9th and Christian is my favorite poem ever. And
that's saying something.
Yeah, that's saying something. And I think that fig trees are kind of magical things, because they produce these figs for like 6 days. And then they don't produce anything else for a year.
Sonia Scott said, I have a lemon tree. You live on the coast of Georgia now.
Stop bragging about your warm
awesome.
weather.
That's awesome. My mom and dad grew a fig tree for their anniversary, and it's doing pretty well. All of it needs a lot of sunlight. All right. So we can... it needs is a lot of sunlight.
So next week, I will have planted our fig tree, and life will be good.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
So we start every Talkin' Toast by asking a simple question, and it's not what kind of fruit you grow in your backyard. It is actually what is sustaining you, and maybe it is the fruit in your backyard.
Maybe it's the same thing. So I feel like you should go first with this. What is sustaining you?
Why should I go first? I'm not growing any fruit in our backyard yet.
No.
I am doing watercolor.
That's that's
what's
growth.
Sustaining me.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
That is beautiful. You didn't draw that.
This tree over here is lacking.
Is it Bob Ross? Is that the guy's name with the happy trees?
Bob Ross, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't draw that. That's Bob Ross.
So, what is sustaining me?
He's oil, anyway. That's watercolor.
Yeah. What is sustaining me is that I got myself, last week, I ended up at this state park, literally in our town. And we walk up to the state park playground. It's called Tire Park. And there is a person out there with like all these really cool watercolor things. And I was like, I'm going to try it out. Never done watercolor in my life. And I tried it out, and it was fun. It was really relaxing. And so I was like, I need this in my life. And so I ordered some watercolor.
I'm just going to brag for a little while. Keep on talking.
Well, yeah, so I did that. I needed something to like center myself the other morning before I signed on for work. And I was like, I'm going to do this little painting. And so I did. It's the only painting in my little sketchbook.
That's so beautiful. You've got happy trees.
I've got happy trees, except for that one is a moderately distressed
that
tree.
one might have like a pine beetle.
It has a disease. This tree has a disease.
It has a pine beetle. It's okay.
Look at that tree. But man, it's been cool, and I feel like hot weather makes me angry. You know.
Yes.
And I painted that, and it was like so delightful.
Good for you.
And so we went to Michael's the other day, and I got myself some real watercolor brushes, and who knows what'll come of it.
Well, if that's with the fake watercolor brushes, that's pretty amazing.
Maybe by the time I plant my fig tree, the watercolor will be a thing of the past. Who knows?
No. You'll have to draw your process of planting the fig tree. You know what I mean?
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. It can be, 10 pages away, and all of a sudden it's growing a little bit.
A series of fig tree paintings.
A series of the fig.
series of the fig.
Anyway.
What is sustaining you?
I've been playing a lot of music lately because I've been trying to get ready for camp. That's the one that Deanna is talking about. We do a week-long camp. I put together this list. It looks like it's about 40 songs. That's what's going to end up happening. And so I get to play with some really incredible musicians. I'll name them. I get to play with Michael Stonewick on guitar. I get to play with Lexi Stonewick. She's going to sing beautifully. And then Moses Andrews III is going to come and play organ with me and keys, and he's just amazing. And then Sean Thompson is going to come up at the beginning, and he's going to play whatever Sean wants to play. That's just
Sean will show up with a sitar.
Yeah.
Who knows?
He's going to probably play some bass and sitar.
And sitar.
Who knows? And then Bob Luking is coming in all the way from Scotland. Bob's coming to play some bass, and anyway, I'm really excited about that. So, in preparing for this, we've been writing a song and kind of put the song together, and excited.
We've been writing a song.
I put the song. I
wrote the song.
I wrote the song, but everybody's adding their gifts to it, and I'm really excited about it. So. Yeah, I'm having some fun. It's one that's a very Disciples song.
Yeah.
It's called To the Table, which works.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
It's going to rock.
Yep. Are you going to put the theme song on Spotify by chance? Ooh, yes. That's the goal.
47 years.
No, not 47 years.
Sorry.
Katie's making a joke. I'm still finishing this album that I've been working on for 5 years, and yes,
life has happened. A pandemic happened.
Lots of things happened in the meantime. We moved 5 times in the middle of that. So yes, Deanna, I'll put it on Spotify. Hopefully, it'll be on Spotify by the end of camp next week after next. So
yeah, yep.
We'll see what happens.
Yep. Speaking of camp.
Yes.
If we're delirious.
Yes.
We led children's camp at the beach this weekend at the Disciples Conference Center that the region has, and we had 18 kids over the summer solstice, which meant it was a full moon. And
Friday night it was a full moon.
It was wild.
Bill Harding said Katie can do the cover art. Will you do the cover art?
I'll do the cover art.
All right. That'd be great.
I'll paint my fig tree.
Yeah. Maybe a table. Because it'll be a single. You can maybe put that in there somewhere.
I'm gonna paint my fig tree on that cover art.
Fine. Do the fig tree.
Oh.
That's great. Yeah, so we were with the kids, and we figured out this might transition into Mr. Rogers a little bit.
Yeah.
But we figured out the importance and of godly play. We figured out the importance of setting the threshold.
Yeah, like being intentional about bringing them into a space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Space making, really. Because they came in and they were like, "Wah!"
Yeah.
You know, it's a fun group of kids when Sophie's the calm one.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So, yeah, we making that space. Well, yeah, I think I'm going to make a weird transition into what we're actually talking about.
What are we actually talking about tonight?
Tonight, we've asked what's sustaining you, and during this process, if there's something that sticks out to you, we would love for you to chime in and talk back, because we are ending our sermon series on Mr. Rogers. Now, it doesn't mean that this is the last time we'll do a sermon series on Mr. Rogers, because this has been really life-giving.
Yeah, and also, we could probably include Mr. Rogers every week in worship and still not scratch the surface of the complexities that he brought to the table.
That's exactly right. Complexities and the life-giving lessons that he brings to the table. So... Anyway, we're ending our sermon series on this, but it's a lectionary-based sermon series, which means that we follow the same kind of order that a lot of different other churches do. And so the first scripture this week that we will talk about in our homilies, and really the only scripture that we'll talk about in our homilies for the most part.
Yeah.
It's Mark 5, verses 21 through 43. And so let's give a little context. We're in the book of Mark. Mark was the first book written that's a gospel that we know of, that we have an account of. Mark was probably the gospel that Luke, the author of which we think was John. Anyway, Luke and Matthew had in their hands as they were writing. Mark is very fast paced. Mark is short on details, but in this passage there are a lot of details.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
And it's like this story starts and Jesus slows down.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm going to focus on this week. In this story, Jesus it goes across the other side of the lake, and that's the cue.
That's the change in scene.
Exactly.
It's
that's
like
kind of
cut.
setting the threshold, but it's also for the story.
Yeah.
But then it's also saying, like, the crowds were too overwhelming, so Jesus went to the other side of the lake. And then the crowd got too overwhelming, and so he goes to the other side of the
Jesus
lake.
was
and
an
he's
introvert.
trying, well, possibly, but he definitely needed that time away.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, Jesus goes to the other side of the lake, gets out, the crowds start overwhelming him, and right off the bat, Jairus, we think that's how that's said.
Jairus.
We talked about it earlier. Jairus comes up to Jesus, and he is one of the leaders of the synagogue, and he comes up and says, "My daughter has fallen ill, and she needs you." And so I imagine there was some pressing from the disciples, like
yeah, we got to go do this.
This is a big deal. This is one of the leaders of the synagogue. This is our chance. Like, we can really set things up well
and make progress in making those inroads in the establishment, in the established religion, right?
Exactly.
Because I don't know that Jesus ever set out to create anything new, but I think something new came as a result of a lot of the ways that what he did was interpreted. And I think that his kind of tension and critique of the established religion of Judaism, while he was within it, let's not forget that he was Jewish. So it was an internal critique, but his critique was interpreted later on as a starting something new.
And we do have the passage, like, "You're the rock upon which I will build my church," that kind of thing. But that's very pointed, and you got to pay attention to which gospel that shows up in, and those kinds of things.
And these are all post-resurrection narratives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in this, the crowds are pressing in, and Jesus says, "Okay, I'll go." And as he's going, you okay?
Yep.
As he's going, it says the crowd is pressing in, getting closer and closer, and Jesus feels the power go out of him because somebody has touched his robe. And I can't imagine whenever Jesus says, like, "Who touched my robe?" Like, who touched me?
So many people were touching him.
Everybody's touching you. Like, how in the world?
Yeah.
And so Jesus asks the question, "Who touched my clothes?" And we're talking about the kindness of Fred Rogers. I wonder how he asked that question. I wonder if it was one of those, like, "Who touched my clothes?" Was it a "Who touched my clothes?"
I've always heard this story as, like, Jesus recognizes that someone needs him in that moment.
Yeah.
And, like, he recognizes that someone reaches out in need.
Yeah.
Not like someone reaches out as like a greedy way of getting a leg up on
No.
somebody else, but somebody reaches out in need, and Jesus recognizes it and says, okay, I need to find whoever this was.
Yes. And so it's interesting to me that we get Jairus's name, and it says my daughter. We don't have his daughter's name.
Right.
And then we have all of this woman's background story. She has tried for years and years and years because she's hemorrhaging blood, and she can't find help. She spent her I don't want to say fortune, because we don't know if it was a fortune.
Her life's savings.
But she spent all of her money trying to figure out her health condition, and to no avail. And Jesus, in this sense, says, who touched me? Turns and sees Tabitha. I'm going to call her Tabitha. Turns and sees Tabitha, and Tabitha is scared because all of a sudden she knows I touched him, and this is what he's talking about.
And she wouldn't have been allowed to touch anyone at that time.
Exactly.
Right?
Because she was unclean.
She was unclean.
She was hemorrhaging blood. And so she's scared. And Jesus says, your faith has made you well. And then they so with this, I want to keep going through the story because it's a really long story. We end up, the disciples go with Jesus to Jairus' house to see his daughter. I think his daughter's name was, here, why don't you name his daughter? Think about it for a minute. They go in and they see his daughter and realize that she is dead. She's gone. And Jesus comes up and says, your daughter is not dead, she's just sleeping. And people laugh at Jesus with that thing. So what's her name?
Phoebe
is dead, and Jesus takes a small group in to hold Phoebe's hand, and Phoebe gets up, which I think is just absolutely beautiful. In this, I think Mark does a good job of talking about the crowd pressing in and Jesus being late to the arrival of Phoebe's side. And I think there's something in there about pace, and something in there about showing up, and the kindness of pace. And I really feel like that is a lesson I need in this. So I don't know if there are others who need this lesson, but the purpose of this to me is the showing up part. It's Jesus taking a moment to recognize the humanity over and over again, and treating these nameless people like Tabitha and Phoebe as human beings. It doesn't matter to me. I don't know, and I have a feeling it didn't matter to Jesus who Jairus was. It mattered who Phoebe was. It didn't matter that this was an unclean woman. It mattered that Tabitha touched him.
And that she needed him. Yeah.
So that's who Jesus shows is important in this text.
Yeah, and that paying attention to the world is paying attention to the needs around us is the vehicle for healing the world.
Yeah, that's the pace of kindness.
Yeah.
Going fast enough to move, but slow enough to
be
recognize.
Able to pay attention.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because what I'm going to be talking about is the natural silences of life. That Mr. Rogers helps us befriend the natural silences of life. That sometimes his pacing is even off-putting. I've heard a lot of people talk about like it kind of being a little bit creepy. It's just weird.
It is.
If you watch it, especially in the context of what he was doing, so in the context of Sesame Street and the Bozo the Clown shows, in the context of what he was doing, children's entertainment at that time was moving very fast. It was slapstick. It was always looking for that next laugh.
Yeah, and I want to be careful about the Sesame Street, lumping Sesame Street in with that.
Sure.
He was really responding to. It wasn't Bozo the Clown. There was another name of the clown, and I can't remember.
But Sesame Street was a part of his.
Captain Kangaroo. No, it wasn't
I
can't remember. But, anyway.
But Sesame Street was a part of his critique.
Yeah.
And he did talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But that so what's interesting and that I just learned is that at the beginning of the Mr. Rogers entry show, like the entry to the show, you know, the camera hovers over a neighborhood, and the only thing moving in that neighborhood is a yellow blinking traffic light, which means what?
Caution, slow down.
Caution, slow down. Howdy doody, Lori Lane says.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe that. So Mr. Rogers is inviting people at the very beginning of his show. He's setting this threshold to say, let's slow down. Let's take a breath so that we can pay attention to one another. And he was known for that. He was known for this very deliberate pacing that allowed him to truly give the attention to whoever was before him. He said this. He said, the world needs more time to wonder and reflect on what is inside. The world needs more time to wonder and reflect on what is inside. And so I think about my perception of his pacing. I think about that, what you call the pace of kindness. I think about that, and I think about the way that it is in that very deliberate attention giving that he is a part of healing the world. It is through paying attention deliberately that he is able to begin knitting together the soul of our world in a way that we've never been able to do, or maybe have not been able to do in a long time. And I think that's what's special about him. And I think that's the thing that I need to be reminded of. And in a similar way, what you talked about with Jesus slowing down and paying attention to this, the woman who needs him, my pace is often breakneck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we talk about, like last time we did this, we talked about imagination and how important it is to engage your imagination in kind of setting a vision for what could be next, right? If you dare to dream, think about what might be next first. But that kind of is forward pushing and is kind of propulsive toward the future. But I think that's very much balanced out with this slow and deliberate pacing that allowed him to really honor the person or persons who were in front of him.
It's funny because in interviews, Tom Hanks was asked about his role in Won't You Be My Neighbor, and he said, you know, I've done a lot of acting. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to act in the pace of Mr. Rogers. Yeah. He said it was so like counterintuitive. Yeah. Not counterintuitive, but like socially it was like what am I trying to say there? Not counterintuitive. Societal. It's the opposite. Countercultural. Thank you. It was so countercultural and to everything, and almost in every acting position he had ever been in. Mm-hmm. And but he also recognized the importance of that, and that's something that sets him apart. Yeah,
it makes me think about, and I've said this over and over again to a number of different people, but it makes me think about in godly play. Mm-hmm. In godly play, we have 4 different types of stories that teach something about the faith. And so we have our core stories, our sacred stories that happen in the desert and that happen primarily in the Old Testament. And then we have our parables, which are the words of Jesus, the sacred words of Jesus. They come in these really cool gold boxes. And then we have the liturgical action stories, which are the things that the church does to carry forward this faith. But then the fourth type of story that we have in the classroom in Godly Play is the story of silence. And it's in the story of silence where we often learn the most. In a lot of cases, it's in the story of silence. It is in the spirit of that story of silence that people are invited to respond to the stories that they've heard, the other three types of stories that they've heard. And so I think about how vital that silence is to our lives, and what we might do to find it, to slow down and listen to the teacher that is silence.
That's interesting. I also think about in this Jesus passage, as I imagine it's chaotic with all the crowds pressing in and all this, and then his question is, who touched me? I imagine that as Jesus is going through and he asked that question, I imagine there was kind of a
like a pause.
Yeah,
like everything stands still for a minute.
Yeah
And
like, what did he just ask? And I think about that as that's when the power moves. So when you're talking about the silence, the power in that silence, there's a flow there to moving toward the silence.
And maybe silence is a way of shifting power dynamics. Because I think Fred does that. And what that does is it shifts, his silence shifts the power from him to whoever is watching him.
Yeah.
To be an agent in their own story and make sense of what is being said.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Every week, we do some talking just like this. And last week, thank you for giving us a week off. Our friend Renee Bland preached at Christian Temple and just did a phenomenal job.
She did.
And she's just wonderful. And so we're glad, Gloria Renee Bland, if you're watching right now, Reverend Doctor.
Yeah.
She brought the house down, and I'm so glad that she was with us while we were at the beach. It sounds like we were at the beach. We were working.
Friday night.
Lordy.
Friday night after our first session, we looked at each other like, "Are we gonna survive this? What did we get ourselves
what do
into?"
We do?
Oh, but we thrived.
It was in the silence that we were kind of like.
It was funny because we told this story about listening for God, and I'm not even sure what I said in that story. It was so wild. Oh my gosh.
That's good stuff.
Well, it's time. We end every night when we have Talking Toast. We end every night with a little toast, a blessing of sorts to send you on your journey. So go now, friends, from wherever you are, from whatever fruit is growing in your backyard. Go now and remember to slow down and to soak in the lessons that silence has to teach you.
And may you continually find that balance, and that balance is the pace of kindness in some way. May you tap into that pace this week and every week.
Cheers.
Cheers, friends. Bill Harding said Mr. Rogers spoke softly, slowly. I use very simple words.
Yeah.
He did.
He did. All right.
Did. We will see.
He also said he was interviewed about this, about whether people who were more boisterous needed to take on his qualities, and he said, "No, I want you to be just the way you are."
There you go. There
Cheers
you go.
to y'all.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see you next week, friends. Next week is
Normal week.
normal week.
You're going to be the color
July
commentator.
2nd. Yeah, I'll be the color commentator because Katie's preaching on her own. So I might just like pepper you with questions the whole way through. How does that sound?
That sounds fine. My priority right now is there is a really sweet, snuggly dog on the couch right behind the computer.
Yeah. We'll go. See that dog. All right.
Good night, everyone.